The pounding of fists on a door shattered the quiet of a Sunday morning in Dayton, Ohio. Police! Open up! February 2014, 11 years after Marissa Monroe vanished without a trace, and someone was finally being led away in handcuffs. The arrest wasn't made at some seedy motel or criminal hideout. It happened at 1352 Maple Street, a well-maintained colonial with crisp white shutters and neatly trimmed hedges. The kind of home where neighbors wave as they collect their mail. The kind of place where no one locks their doors at night. The suspect wasn't some drifter or known criminal. It was Professor Thomas Whitfield, respected biology department chair, mentor to countless students, and pillar of the community for over 2 decades. The quiet neighborhood erupted in disbelief. Mothers pulled children closer. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the unthinkable unfolded before them. "Not Tom," they whispered. "There must be some mistake." But there was no mistake. After 11 years of dead ends, false leads, and heartbreaking anniversaries, detectives had finally uncovered the horrifying truth behind what happened to 22-year-old Marissa on that autumn night in 2003. What evidence finally broke this case wide open? How did this respected academic allegedly hide such darkness for over a decade? And why did he allegedly target this promising young student? The answers will leave you stunned. Before we dive into this shocking case, take a second right now to hit that subscribe button. I investigate the most baffling cold cases that were eventually solved, often decades later, and the twisted minds of those responsible. You won't want to miss a single video on this channel. Now let's rewind to 2003. When a bright young woman with everything to live for simply disappeared. Marissa Monroe wasn't just another student at Dayton University. With her contagious laugh and trademark red scrunchie always securing her curly brown hair, she stood out even in a crowd. At 22, the senior biology major had already accomplished what many scientists only dream of, having her research on cellular regeneration in amphibians accepted for publication in a prestigious academic journal. Her professors described her as brilliant but humble, the rare kind of student who would ace an exam then spend hours tutoring classmates who were struggling. Born and raised in Cleveland, Marissa was the middle child between 2 brothers. Her mother, Patricia, worked double shifts as a nurse to support the family after Marissa's father died of heart failure when she was just 14. That loss shaped Marissa profoundly. She was determined to develop better cardiac treatments, her mother would later tell reporters. Everything she did in her studies was building toward that goal. In her small off-campus apartment, photos lined the walls. Marissa hiking in Yellowstone with her high school friends, arm in arm with her brothers at her mom's remarriage, laughing with her roommate from sophomore year. A candid snapshot showed her feeding ducks at the campus pond, completely absorbed in the moment, exemplifying the mindful presence friends said she carried everywhere. Marissa's planner, recovered from her desk after her disappearance, revealed the methodical approach she took to life. Color-coded tabs separated classes, research hours, volunteer time at the campus animal shelter, and social events. The margins were filled with quotes she found inspiring. "The universe is made of stories, not atoms," and "Science is not only a disciple of reason, but also one of romance and passion." Her relationship status had recently changed from "it's complicated" to single. 3 months before her disappearance, she'd ended things with boyfriend Kyle Preston, a chemistry grad student. Friends reported the breakup was difficult but amicable. They simply wanted different futures. Kyle planned to join a pharmaceutical company in Boston, while Marissa had just received early acceptance to 3 medical schools, including her dream program at Johns Hopkins. She was debating between specializing in cardiology or research medicine. Her academic advisor, Dr. Sarah Williams, noted, either way, she was going to change lives. The day Marissa disappeared started ordinarily enough. Security footage from the science building showed her arriving at 7:43 a.m., coffee in hand, nodding to the security guard as she always did. She attended her morning lectures, stopped by the library to return a stack of books, and met her best friend Rachel Turner for lunch at their favorite sandwich shop off campus. She seemed completely normal, Rachel later told detectives. She was excited about finishing her thesis and talked about hosting a small graduation party. Nothing seemed off. At 3:15 p.m., Marissa led a study group for freshman biology students. 20-year-old James Harmon was among the last people to see her in an official capacity. She stayed late, helping me understand cell division. She was always going above and beyond for everyone. Surveillance cameras captured her leaving campus at 5:22 p.m., stopping briefly to pet a golden retriever tied outside the campus bookstore. She then walked to the local grocery store, where receipts show she purchased ingredients for homemade soup, a bottle of white wine, and food for her cat, Clover, at 5:47 p.m. A neighbor saw her entering her apartment building at approximately 6:15 p.m., grocery bags in hand, headphones on, seemingly without a care in the world. She waved at Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly woman who lived across the hall and often baked cookies for students in the building. At 7:03 p.m., Marissa called Rachel to confirm their study session later that evening. She said she was making soup and would meet me at the lab around 9 p.m. to go over our presentation for the next day, Rachel recounted, her voice breaking during police interviews. She sounded completely fine, happy even. That was the last verified contact anyone had with Marissa Monroe. When 9 p.m. came and went with no sign of Marissa and no answer to Rachel's increasingly worried texts and calls, something that had never happened before, Rachel walked to Marissa's apartment. The lights were on. The door was unlocked. The soup was still simmering on the stove, but Marissa was gone. Clover the cat was frantically pawing at the window, unusually agitated. A half glass of wine sat on the coffee table. The TV was playing a rerun of Friends, Marissa's favorite show that she watched religiously every Thursday night. Her cell phone was still charging on the kitchen counter. Her keys, wallet, and pepper spray, which her mother insisted she carry, were still in her purse by the door. Everything indicated Marissa had stepped away momentarily and intended to return, but she never did. In the 11 years that followed, the question of what happened to Marissa Monroe haunted the Dayton community, her family, and the investigators assigned to her case. Why would a bright young woman with so much promise and such careful habits simply vanish? Who could possibly want to harm someone universally described as kind, brilliant, and thoughtful? The truth, when it finally emerged 11 years later, would shake the community to its core. Have you ever heard of this case before? Or perhaps one similar in your hometown? Let me know in the comments below. Cases like Marissa's often fly under the national radar, but leave deep scars on local communities. Thursday, October 16th, 2003. 7:26 p.m. The autumn wind rattled the windows of Marissa's third-floor apartment as darkness settled over Dayton. Weather reports would later confirm the temperature had dropped to an unseasonable 38 degrees that evening. A cold front had moved in, bringing with it a misty drizzle that blurred the streetlights and left glistening patterns on the pavement below. Inside apartment 3B, Marissa stirred her homemade vegetable soup, a recipe passed down from her grandmother. The aroma of thyme and rosemary filled the small kitchen. She'd changed into comfortable clothes after returning from the grocery store, gray Dayton University sweatpants and an oversized blue hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in her signature red scrunchie, slightly damp from a quick shower. 7:31 p.m. Marissa's phone records show she texted her mother, "Presentation prep tonight. Call you tomorrow. Love you." Patricia Monroe would later cling to these mundane last words from her daughter, analyzing them for any hint of distress or foreshadowing. But there was none. 7:42 p.m. Security footage from the building's lobby captured the pizza delivery driver dropping off an order to apartment 2A. The same footage showed no one entering or exiting the building's main entrance during this time. However, investigators would later discover that the rear emergency exit had a faulty alarm system and could be used without triggering any alerts. 7:58 p.m. Marissa's laptop shows she logged into her university email account and downloaded several research articles on cardiac stem cells. The last document opened was at 8:02 p.m., an attachment from Professor Thomas Whitfield containing feedback on her thesis draft. The email had arrived earlier that day with the subject line, "Urgent. Please review before our meeting tomorrow." 8:15 p.m. Rachel Turner, sitting in the university lab waiting for Marissa to arrive for their planned study session, sent the first of what would become increasingly concerned text messages. "Hey, you still coming to the lab? Got us coffees." This message was delivered to Marissa's phone but never read. 8:23 p.m. Rachel called Marissa for the first time. The call went directly to voicemail after ringing 6 times. "Hey, it's me. Did you fall asleep? We're supposed to finish the slides tonight. Call me back." 8:37 p.m. Rachel called again, and again at 8:42 p.m. and 8:51 p.m. 8:55 p.m. A neighbor in apartment 3A, Michael Grayson, later reported hearing what sounded like something heavy falling in Marissa's apartment. He didn't think much of it at the time, assuming Marissa had dropped a textbook or knocked something over. "I almost knocked on her door to check if everything was okay," he told police. "I wish to God I had." 9:03 p.m. Growing increasingly worried, Rachel packed up her materials from the lab and decided to walk to Marissa's apartment. The rain had intensified, and she huddled under her umbrella for the 15-minute walk across campus. She tried calling twice more during this walk, both calls going unanswered. 9:18 p.m. Rachel arrived at Marissa's building soaking wet despite her umbrella. The security footage shows her shaking out her umbrella in the lobby, her expression clearly concerned as she repeatedly checked her phone. 9:20 p.m. Rachel knocked on Marissa's door. No response. She knocked again, harder. "Marissa? It's Rachel. Are you in there?" Silence. Rachel tried the door handle, surprised to find it unlocked. Marissa was typically cautious about security, always locking her door even when just running down to check the mail. What Rachel found inside would become seared into her memory forever. The lights were on in every room: kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom. The small television played a Friends episode, the one where Ross and Rachel finally get together. A half-empty glass of white wine sat on the coffee table beside an open textbook, a yellow highlighter uncapped beside it. In the kitchen, the soup was still simmering on low heat, the wooden spoon resting against the pot's edge. Steam rose lazily into the air, condensing on the kitchen window. Marissa's phone was plugged into the charger on the kitchen counter. Her backpack was on the chair where she always left it. Her keys and wallet were in her purse by the door. The bathroom light was on, the shower curtain pulled back, towel slightly damp hanging on the rack. And most disturbing of all, Clover the cat was frantically pawing at the window, meowing desperately as if trying to communicate something vital. The scene appeared as if Marissa had simply vanished in mid-motion, as if someone had pressed pause on her life and then plucked her from the frame. "Marissa," Rachel called again, moving through the apartment, checking each room, growing increasingly frantic. "This isn't funny. Where are you?" 9:26 p.m. Rachel, hands shaking, called campus security. "Something's wrong," she told the dispatcher, her voice trembling. "My friend Marissa Monroe is missing. I'm at her apartment. Everything's here. Her phone, her keys, her wallet. But she's gone." The dispatcher, following standard protocol for an adult missing less than 24 hours, suggested Marissa had perhaps stepped out briefly and would return soon. "You don't understand," Rachel insisted, growing hysterical. "She would never leave without her phone. Never. And the food is still cooking. Something happened to her." 9:42 p.m. Campus security officer Kevin Bennett arrived at the apartment. The security footage shows him entering the building, directed to 3B by the night manager. Officer Bennett conducted a cursory examination of the apartment, noting nothing appeared disturbed or suggested a struggle. "Are you sure she didn't mention going out?" he asked Rachel. "Maybe with another friend?" Rachel shook her head emphatically. "We had plans to meet at the lab at 9 o'clock. She was making soup, then coming over. She would have texted if plans changed, and she would never leave her phone. Never." 10:15 p.m. Officer Bennett, now concerned enough to escalate the situation, contacted the Dayton Police Department. 10:38 p.m. Detectives Sarah Lamont and Marcus Rodriguez arrived at Marissa's apartment, officially beginning what would become one of Dayton's most perplexing missing persons cases. The detectives immediately noticed several concerning details that Officer Bennett had overlooked. There was a small brownish smudge on the doorframe, later confirmed to be blood, Marissa's blood. The window in the bedroom was unlocked, despite the cold weather. And most tellingly, Marissa's pepper spray, which her mother had confirmed she religiously carried, had been deployed. Traces of the chemical irritant were found on the living room carpet. Something had definitely happened in apartment 3B. 11:20 p.m. The detectives called Patricia Monroe in Cleveland. The official report notes that Detective Lamont spoke with Mrs. Monroe for 17 minutes, explaining that Marissa was missing under suspicious circumstances. By midnight, Patricia Monroe had packed her car and begun the 3-hour drive to Dayton, calling her sons to meet her there. By morning, the news had spread throughout the campus. October 17, 2003, 7:30 a.m. The local morning news ran its first story on the disappearance. Dayton University student missing under mysterious circumstances. The reporter stood outside Marissa's apartment building, where police tape now cordoned off the entrance. 22-year-old Marissa Monroe, a senior biology major, apparently vanished from her apartment last night, the reporter explained. Police are asking anyone with information to come forward. 8:45 a.m. The university president issued a statement urging students to travel in pairs and exercise caution. Extra security personnel were deployed across campus. Classes continued, but attendance was sparse as a sense of dread settled over the university. 9:15 a.m. The first search party formed spontaneously, students and faculty gathering in the quad, organizing into groups to comb the campus and surrounding neighborhoods. Professor Thomas Whitfield, Marissa's thesis advisor, was notably at the forefront, coordinating with campus security to ensure all areas were covered. "She was one of our brightest stars," he told a local reporter, his voice catching. "We're going to find her." 11:30 a.m. Patricia Monroe arrived in Dayton, her face drawn with fear and exhaustion. She was escorted directly to the police station, where she provided investigators with photos, medical records, and detailed information about her daughter's habits and relationships. "She wouldn't just leave," Patricia insisted. "Something happened to my daughter." By noon, Marissa's face was on every television screen in Dayton. Her disappearance had captured the community's attention in a way few cases had before. Perhaps it was her obvious promise and potential. Perhaps it was the disturbing nature of the scene at her apartment, everything in place except Marissa herself. Or perhaps it was the growing realization that this wasn't a case of a college student taking off impulsively. This was something sinister. 2:09 p.m. Police expanded their search to include the wooded area behind the campus, using K-9 units trained in tracking human scent. The dogs led officers to the West Campus parking lot before losing the trail, suggesting Marissa may have been transported from the area by vehicle. 6:00 p.m. 24 hours after Marissa was last heard from, the case was officially upgraded to a potential abduction. The FBI was contacted to provide assistance. 7:00 p.m., a candlelight vigil formed spontaneously on the campus quad. Nearly 2,000 students, faculty, and community members gathered, holding flickering lights against the darkness that had now fallen twice since Marissa vanished. Rachel Turner, still in shock, addressed the crowd. "Marissa is the kindest person I know. She's helped every single person she's ever met. Now she needs our help. Please, if you saw anything, heard anything, know anything, come forward." As the autumn wind extinguished candle after candle, the crowd huddled closer together, united in fear and hope. Professor Whitfield stood at the back of the gathering, his expression unreadable as he watched the proceedings. When approached by a student, witnesses say he appeared distracted, checking his watch repeatedly before leaving early. By day 3, Marissa's disappearance had made national news. The mystery of the student who vanished while making soup captivated the country. But despite the attention, despite the extensive searches, despite the thousands of tips that flooded the Dayton Police Department, Marissa Monroe had simply vanished. The soup pot, eventually removed as evidence, became a haunting symbol of interrupted life, of plans never completed, of a future suddenly, violently derailed. And for 11 long years, the question would hang over Dayton like a shadow. What happened to Marissa Monroe on that autumn night in 2003? October 18, 2003. 48 hours had passed since Marissa Monroe vanished from her apartment, and the Dayton Police Department had transformed a conference room into the nerve center for what was now their highest priority case. Case boards lined the walls, timeline on one, persons of interest on another, evidence logs on a third. At the center of it all hung Marissa's senior portrait, her confident smile a stark contrast to the grim faces of the investigators working to find her. Detective Sarah Lamont hadn't slept in 36 hours. The first 48 hours are critical in any disappearance, she told her team during the 7 a.m. briefing. After that, our chances of finding Marissa alive decreased significantly. The forensic processing of Apartment 3B had been meticulous. Technicians in white paper suits had examined every surface, photographed every room from multiple angles, and collected dozens of samples. The evidence log, already running to 7 pages, included the blood smudge on the doorframe, confirmed through preliminary testing to be Marissa's type, traces of pepper spray residue on the living room carpet and near the front door, a partial shoe print in the hallway outside the bathroom, size 11 men's not matching any shoes in Marissa's closet, fingerprints from the apartment door, countertops, and windows, most belonging to Marissa, Rachel, and the building maintenance worker. Several unidentified prints that were being run through databases. Marissa's laptop and phone, both secured for digital forensic analysis. Hair samples from the drain and bathroom floor. Fibers from the living room carpet that didn't match any of Marissa's clothing. Most puzzling was what they didn't find. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of a violent struggle, no obvious indication of what had happened in those critical moments when Marissa apparently left her soup simmering and vanished. It's like she opened the door to someone she knew, Detective Rodriguez theorized. Someone she wasn't afraid of, at least initially. By 9 a.m., the detectives had compiled a list of everyone in Marissa's life who needed to be interviewed: friends, classmates, professors, ex-boyfriends, neighbors, even the regular barista at the campus coffee shop where she studied. Rachel Turner had been interviewed 3 times already, her account of that night analyzed from every angle. Her alibi was solid. Security footage showed her in the university lab until 9:03 p.m., then walking directly to Marissa's apartment. Phone records confirmed her multiple calls to Marissa. Every person who knew both women confirmed they were inseparable friends with no conflicts. I keep replaying that day in my mind, Rachel told detectives, dark circles under her bloodshot eyes. Was she acting differently? Did she say something I missed? I can't stop thinking about her soup on the stove. She was just making dinner, and then Kyle Preston, Marissa's ex-boyfriend, was tracked down at a chemistry conference in Chicago. Airport records and multiple witnesses confirmed he'd been there since Wednesday, making it physically impossible for him to be involved. Phone records showed no contact between him and Marissa for over 2 weeks prior to her disappearance. We ended things amicably, he explained via video conference, visibly shaken by the news. Marissa is brilliant and kind. Everyone loved her. I can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt her. The neighbor who reported hearing something fall, Michael Grayson, was interviewed twice. His story remained consistent. A thud from Marissa's apartment around 8:55 p.m., but nothing that had seemed alarming enough to investigate. I thought she dropped a book, he repeated, guilt etched on his face. If I had just knocked on her door. By Saturday afternoon, investigators had compiled a list of everyone who had entered or exited the apartment building between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. on Thursday night. Most were accounted for. Residents returning from work or dinner, the pizza delivery person, a maintenance worker finishing a repair in the basement. But there was a 20-minute gap in the lobby security footage from 8:40 p.m. to 9 p.m. "The system occasionally reboots," explained the building manager. "It happens every few days. Terrible timing." The rear emergency exit, with its faulty alarm, became a focus of the investigation. K9 units tracked Marissa's scent from her apartment, down the emergency stairwell, to the back parking lot where the trail went cold. Tire impression casts were taken from the rain-softened soil behind the building, but the results were inconclusive. Too many vehicles had passed through since Thursday night. At 4 p.m., Detective Lamont received the preliminary analysis of Marissa's phone and laptop. Her last known action had been reviewing thesis feedback from Professor Whitfield. Her email contained nothing suspicious, just routine communications with professors, friends, and family. Her calendar showed the planned study session with Rachel at 9 p.m. The search of her browsing history revealed a recent interest in cardiac research facilities across the country, consistent with her career plans. Nothing indicated she planned to leave or was afraid of anyone. Her bank accounts showed no unusual activity, and her credit cards hadn't been used since she bought groceries Thursday evening. By Saturday night, the investigation had expanded to include interviews with Marissa's professors. Most expressed shock and concern, offering the same portrait of a dedicated, brilliant student with a promising future. Professor Whitfield, her thesis advisor, appeared particularly affected. "I can't believe this is happening," he told detectives, running his hands through his graying hair. "I just sent her feedback on her thesis draft that afternoon. She was doing groundbreaking work on cellular regeneration." When asked about their relationship, Whitfield described it as strictly professional, but warm. "I've mentored dozens of students over 20 years. Marissa was exceptional, destined for a remarkable career in medicine." His alibi for Thursday night seemed solid. He reported being home with his wife grading papers. Mrs. Whitfield confirmed this account, though she mentioned he'd stepped out briefly to drop something off at the department around 8 p.m. This timing caught the detective's attention, but with no evidence connecting him to Marissa's disappearance beyond his role as her advisor, they simply noted it for follow-up. Sunday brought the first false lead. A waitress at a highway diner 30 miles outside Dayton reported seeing someone matching Marissa's description early Friday morning. Surveillance footage proved it wasn't her. Then came a second. A jogger found a red scrunchie in the woods near campus. Hours of manpower were deployed before DNA testing revealed it wasn't Marissa's. A third dead end followed. An anonymous tip about a suspicious van near the apartment building. When tracked down, it belonged to a plumber working in the area with documentation proving he was on a job across town Thursday night. If you're following this investigation closely, take a second to hit that like button right now. It helps others find this video, and trust me, the twists and turns in this case get even more surprising as we continue. Plus, every like motivates me to cover more solved cold cases just like this one. By Monday morning, Marissa Monroe had appeared on national television, pleading for information about her daughter. "Marissa is everything to our family," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, if you know anything, come forward. We just want her home." The FBI had officially joined the investigation, bringing additional resources and expertise. Their behavioral analysis unit developed a preliminary profile of what might have happened. "This appears to be a targeted abduction rather than a random crime of opportunity," explained FBI agent Rebecca Foster. "The perpetrator likely knew Marissa's schedule and habits. The lack of struggle suggests she either knew her abductor or was caught completely by surprise. The deployed pepper spray indicates she attempted to defend herself at some point, but the limited evidence of altercation suggests it was quickly neutralized. This profile led investigators to focus even more intensely on people in Marissa's immediate circle. Everyone with access to her schedule or apartment building came under renewed scrutiny. A canvass of the neighborhood revealed something potentially significant. A resident 2 blocks from Marissa's apartment reported seeing a sedan with its lights off driving slowly through the area around 9:30 p.m. Thursday night. The witness couldn't identify the make or model in the darkness, but noted it was a larger American-made car, possibly dark blue or black. This matched a vehicle sometimes used by the university's biology department for field research, a navy blue Ford Taurus, typically parked in the faculty lot. When investigators checked, the log showed no official use of the vehicle on Thursday night, but the keys, kept in a department office desk drawer, were accessible to several faculty members, including Thomas Whitfield. When questioned about the vehicle, Whitfield stated he hadn't used it in months and had been home all evening Thursday except for his brief trip to campus. Security footage from the main campus entrances didn't show the Taurus entering or exiting Thursday night, but investigators noted the rear service road wasn't monitored by cameras. By Tuesday morning, the 5th day of the investigation, the case had stalled. Hundreds of tips had led nowhere. Searches of wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and waterways around Dayton had found no trace of Marissa. Her bank accounts remained untouched, her social media dormant. The most disturbing development came from the forensic analysis of the blood smudge on her doorframe. While the volume was small, the pattern suggested it was from an injury to the head rather than a minor cut or nosebleed. Detective Lamont's notebook from October 21st contained a troubling observation. "We're no longer looking for a missing person. We're looking for a body." But they were wrong. Marissa Monroe wasn't dead. At least, not yet. The seasons changed. Fall turned to winter. The frost-covered campus grew quiet as students left for holiday break, their excited chatter a painful contrast to the silent vigil maintained by Marissa Monroe, who had taken indefinite leave from her nursing job and relocated to a small Dayton hotel room to stay close to the investigation. By January 2004, the daily briefings had become weekly. By March, they were monthly. The FBI task force was reassigned to other cases. The media vans that had cluttered the street outside the police department dwindled, then disappeared. Marissa's face, once featured nightly on national news, faded from public consciousness, just another missing person among thousands in America. But for Detective Sarah Lamont, the case refused to let go. "There's something we're missing," she told her partner Rodriguez, late one night in April 2004, 6 months after the disappearance. They sat surrounded by case files, the photos and timeline now deeply familiar. "Someone knows what happened to her." Every promising lead had evaporated. The navy blue Taurus belonged to the biology department, but extensive forensic examination revealed nothing connecting it to Marissa's disappearance. Professor Whitfield's brief trip to campus the night Marissa vanished was confirmed by security footage showing him entering and exiting the science building within 15 minutes, consistent with dropping off papers. The search radius had expanded to include neighboring counties, then neighboring states. Marissa's dental records and DNA were entered into national databases. Her case was featured on America's Missing in May 2004, generating hundreds of tips, each meticulously followed up, each leading nowhere. On October 16, 2004, the one-year anniversary of Marissa's disappearance, Marissa Monroe stood on the Dayton University quad, surrounded by hundreds holding candles against the autumn darkness. "My daughter is still out there," she told the crowd, her voice stronger than anyone expected. "Someone knows what happened, someone saw something, it's never too late to come forward." Behind her stood Rachel Turner, who had delayed medical school to stay in Dayton and assist with the search efforts, and Professor Whitfield, who had established a scholarship in Marissa's name, funding research opportunities for promising biology students. These annual remembrance ceremonies became a tradition in Dayton, a way to keep Marissa's memory alive and remind potential witnesses that the case remained open. Each year, the crowd grew smaller. Each year, Detective Lamont attended, standing at the back, watching faces in the crowd, wondering if the perpetrator might be among them, drawn back by some twisted need to witness the pain they'd caused. By the second anniversary, Marissa Monroe had become a powerful advocate for missing persons cases nationwide. She established the Marissa Monroe Foundation, which helped families navigate the bureaucratic and emotional labyrinth of a loved one's disappearance. "I couldn't save my daughter," she explained during a fundraiser in 2006, "but I can help others in her name." The third anniversary brought an unexpected development, an anonymous letter sent to the police department, containing only the words, "Check the lake." A massive search operation of Lake Sterling, 10 miles from campus, yielded nothing but renewed public interest. The investigation briefly flared to life before settling back into its dormant state. In 2007, Detective Rodriguez retired. His replacement, Detective Jason Miles, brought fresh eyes to the case but reached the same frustrating dead ends. The problem, Miles observed after reviewing all evidence, is that we have a dozen possible scenarios but can't prove any of them. Did she leave willingly with someone she knew? Was she forced? Was there a random predator who got lucky? Without a crime scene or a body, we're stuck theorizing. The 5th anniversary in 2008 coincided with the economic downturn. Budget cuts hit the police department hard. Cold cases were deprioritized. Detective Lamont, now promoted to sergeant, fought to keep Marissa's file active, but found herself swimming against an institutional current that valued closure rates and current crimes over long-dormant mysteries. Dayton University changed too. The biology building where Marissa had spent countless hours was renovated in 2009, her laboratory barely recognizable. Students who enrolled after her disappearance knew her only as a name on the memorial scholarship. Professor Whitfield, promoted to department chair, mentioned her occasionally in his welcome address to new students as an example of the brilliant minds we nurture here. Marissa Monroe never gave up. Each Christmas, she hung a stocking for Marissa. Each birthday, she bought a gift. Her Cleveland home became a shrine of sorts, Marissa's room preserved exactly as she'd left it during her last visit home, her high school trophies still proudly displayed in the living room. Patricia appeared at missing persons conferences across the country, her initially raw grief gradually transforming into steely determination. The not knowing is the worst part, she told a journalist on the 7th anniversary. Is she alive somewhere? Is she suffering? Is she gone? As a mother, I feel her absence every moment of every day. The investigation wasn't completely dormant. Every few months, Detective Lamont would pull the files, review the evidence, conduct follow-up interviews. Technological advances allowed for reanalysis of forensic evidence, but nothing new emerged. The blood on the doorframe remained Marissa's. The partial shoe print remained unmatched. The fingerprints remained unidentified. In 2010, a true crime podcast featured Marissa's case in a 6-episode series titled The Girl Who Made Soup. The podcast raised awareness and generated a handful of new tips, including a truck driver who believed he might have seen Marissa at a rest stop in Kentucky in early 2004. This lead, like all others, dissolved under scrutiny. The podcast did, however, connect Rachel Turner with 3 other best friends of missing women across the country. They formed a support group that met monthly via video call, sharing the unique pain of having a friendship suspended in perpetual uncertainty. People expect you to move on, Rachel explained in a local newspaper interview marking the 8th anniversary. But how do you move on from a conversation that never ended? Marissa and I were in the middle of planning our presentation. She was going to bring her special highlighters. She texted that she'd see me at 9. And then, nothing. There's no closure. Rachel had finally completed medical school by this time, specializing in emergency medicine, a choice influenced by her experience with Marissa's case. I want to be there in the critical moments, she explained, when minutes matter most. In 2007, Detective Rodriguez retired. His replacement, Detective Jason Miles, brought fresh eyes to the case but reached the same frustrating dead ends. The problem, Miles observed after reviewing all evidence, is that we have a dozen possible scenarios but can't prove any of them. Did she leave willingly with someone she knew? Was she forced? Was there a random predator who got lucky? Without a crime scene or a body, we're stuck theorizing. The 5th anniversary in 2008 coincided with the economic downturn. Budget cuts hit the police department hard. Cold cases were deprioritized. Detective Lamont, now promoted to sergeant, fought to keep Marissa's file active, but found herself swimming against an institutional current that valued closure rates and current crimes over long-dormant mysteries. Dayton University changed too. The biology building where Marissa had spent countless hours was renovated in 2009, her laboratory barely recognizable. Students who enrolled after her disappearance knew her only as a name on the memorial scholarship. Professor Whitfield, promoted to department chair, mentioned her occasionally in his welcome address to new students as an example of the brilliant minds we nurture here. Patricia Monroe never gave up. Each Christmas, she hung a stocking for Marissa. Each birthday, she bought a gift. Her Cleveland home became a shrine of sorts. Marissa's room preserved exactly as she'd left it during her last visit home, her high school trophies still proudly displayed in the living room. Patricia appeared at missing persons conferences across the country, her initially raw grief gradually transforming into steely determination. The not knowing is the worst part, she told a journalist on the 7th anniversary. Is she alive somewhere? Is she suffering? Is she gone? As a mother, I feel her absence every moment of every day. The investigation wasn't completely dormant. Every few months, Detective Lamont would pull the files, review the evidence, conduct follow-up interviews. Technological advances allowed for reanalysis of forensic evidence, but nothing new emerged. The blood on the doorframe remained Marissa's. The partial shoe print remained unmatched. The fingerprints remained unidentified. In 2010, a true crime podcast featured Marissa's case in a 6-episode series titled The Girl Who Made Soup. The podcast raised awareness and generated a handful of new tips, including a truck driver who believed he might have seen Marissa at a rest stop in Kentucky in early 2004. This lead, like all others, dissolved under scrutiny. The podcast did, however, connect Rachel Turner with 3 other best friends of missing women across the country. They formed a support group that met monthly via video call, sharing the unique pain of having a friendship suspended in perpetual uncertainty. People expect you to move on, Rachel explained in a local newspaper interview marking the 8th anniversary. But how do you move on from a conversation that never ended? Marissa and I were in the middle of planning our presentation. She was going to bring her special highlighters. She texted that she'd see me at 9. And then, nothing. There's no closure. Rachel had finally completed medical school by this time, specializing in emergency medicine, a choice influenced by her experience with Marissa's case. I want to be there in the critical moments, she explained, when minutes matter most. In 2012, Professor Whitfield published a groundbreaking paper on cardiac tissue regeneration, acknowledging Marissa's early contributions to the research in the footnotes. The paper received significant attention in scientific circles, further cementing his reputation as a leading researcher in the field. That same year, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit revisited the case as part of a study on long-term missing persons. They noted several unusual aspects, including the lack of financial or personal motivation for Marissa to disappear voluntarily, the absence of a body despite extensive searches, and the highly controlled nature of the apparent abduction. This case exhibits characteristics of a planned rather than opportunistic crime, their report concluded. The perpetrator likely had personal knowledge of the victim and significant self-control. The limited evidence suggests someone with above-average intelligence who took time to consider forensic countermeasures. By the 10th anniversary in 2013, Marissa's case had taken on almost mythic qualities in Dayton. Local high school students wrote essays about her for criminology classes. The bench near the campus pond where she used to feed ducks had been dedicated in her memory. A small bronze plaque reading, Marissa Monroe, forever curious, forever missed. The annual vigil that October drew a surprisingly large crowd, nearly 1,000 people, many of whom had never known Marissa personally, but had grown up with her story. Patricia Monroe, now using a cane but standing straight-backed and resolute, addressed the gathering. 10 years, she began, her voice carrying across the hushed quad. 10 years of searching, 10 years of praying, 10 years of wondering. Someone in this community knows what happened to my daughter. It's never too late to do the right thing. In the crowd, Detective Lamont, now approaching retirement herself, watched Professor Whitfield dabbing at his eyes during Patricia's speech. After a decade of investigating every person in Marissa's life, she had found nothing to implicate him beyond circumstantial timing. Yet something about his grief had always struck her as performative rather than genuine. "Just a feeling," she told her new partner when he questioned her continued interest in Whitfield. "And in 30 years of police work, my feelings have rarely led me astray." As 2013 drew to a close, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved, one of those mysteries that haunts a community for generations, inspiring urban legends and cautionary tales told to new students arriving at Dayton University. No one could have predicted that in just a few months, everything would change. What time is it where you're watching from? Many viewers find themselves down true crime rabbit holes late at night. Let me know in the comments. There's something about these unsolved mysteries that keeps us searching for answers in the dark hours, isn't there? January 14th, 2014. A Tuesday like any other in Dayton, Ohio. Detective Sarah Lamont sat at her desk, retirement paperwork spread before her. After 27 years with the department, she had finally decided to step away. But one case file remained open on her computer: Marissa Monroe. "You're still obsessed with that one, huh?" her new partner, Detective Chris Wilson, remarked as he placed a coffee on her desk. At 32, Wilson represented the new generation of detectives, tech-savvy, data-driven, and unfamiliar with the gut instinct approach that had defined Lamont's career. "Not obsessed," Lamont corrected, "just unfinished." She couldn't explain why Marissa's case had haunted her for over a decade. Perhaps it was the promising life cut short. Perhaps it was the complete lack of closure for Patricia Monroe, who still called the department monthly for updates. Or perhaps it was the nagging feeling that the answer had been in front of them all along. What happened next would later be attributed to luck, timing, and the relentless march of technology. But those who knew Lamont best understood it was also the result of a detective who simply refused to forget. The department had recently implemented a new digital evidence management system. All case files were being uploaded to a centralized database that allowed for cross-referencing and pattern recognition that hadn't been possible before. As part of this process, the digital forensics team was re-examining evidence from unsolved cases, including the limited data recovered from Marissa's laptop in 2003. Adam Jeffries, the department's newest digital forensics specialist, knocked on Lamont's door that afternoon. "I found something in the Monroe case," he said without preamble, "something we missed." Back in 2003, digital forensics was still an emerging field. Investigators had examined Marissa's emails, browser history, and documents, the obvious places. But Jeffries had gone deeper, recovering shadow data from the laptop's hard drive, temporary files that had been created and automatically saved, but never deliberately stored by the user. "It's an automatically saved version of a document she was working on the night she disappeared," he explained, bringing up the file on Lamont's monitor. "It's time-stamped 8:17 p.m., just minutes before she vanished." The document wasn't her thesis or research notes as they might have expected. It was a formal complaint letter addressed to the Dayton University Ethics Committee. Lamont leaned forward, coffee forgotten as she read the first paragraph. "I am writing to formally report concerning behavior and academic misconduct by Professor Thomas Whitfield. Over the past 6 months, what began as a professional mentorship has escalated into uncomfortable personal advances and, most recently, the appropriation of my research without proper attribution." The letter continued, detailing specific instances: unwanted touches during lab sessions, late-night texts unrelated to academics, suggestions that her future recommendations would depend on her cooperation. Most damning was Marissa's claim that Whitfield had submitted a research proposal to a prestigious medical journal based substantially on her work, listing her only as a secondary contributor. She was going to report him, Lamont breathed. The next morning. "There's more," Jeffries said, scrolling down. She had evidence. Attached to the draft was a folder of screenshots, text messages, emails with inappropriate comments disguised as academic feedback, and metadata showing that the research paper Whitfield had recently submitted had been largely copied from files Marissa had created weeks earlier. She was gathering ammunition, Detective Wilson observed, now standing behind them, building an airtight case against him. The The timing suddenly made perfect sense. Whitfield had sent Marissa thesis feedback that afternoon, feedback she had opened at 8:02 p.m. Perhaps that feedback had contained something that pushed her to finalize her complaint. Perhaps she had finally decided enough was enough. And then, sometime between 8:17 p.m. when she saved this draft and 9:20 p.m. when Rachel found her apartment empty, Marissa had vanished. "We need to look at Whitfield's research after she disappeared," Lamont said, already reaching for her phone. "Everything he's published since 2003. By midnight, the picture had become devastatingly clear. Thomas Whitfield's career had blossomed dramatically in the years following Marissa's disappearance. The research paper mentioned in her complaint had been published to significant acclaim in February 2004. Over the next decade, he had built upon that foundation, establishing himself as a pioneer in cardiac tissue regeneration, precisely the field Marissa had been passionate about. His meteoric rise had coincided perfectly with her disappearance. "He stole her research," Wilson summarized, "and then he stole her life." But suspicion wasn't evidence. They needed more. The investigation shifted into high gear, operating with the urgency of a new case rather than an 11-year-old cold one. Judge Martinez signed search warrants at 6 a.m. the following morning. By 7 a.m., digital forensics specialists were imaging Whitfield's university computer, home devices, and cloud accounts. The search of Whitfield's university office yielded nothing unusual. His home computer contained no incriminating searches or communications. His alibi for that night in 2003, being at home with his wife except for a brief trip to campus, remained intact. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A secondary cloud storage account linked to Whitfield's university email but not used for current work. Adam Jeffries discovered it contained archives going back to 2003, including a folder encrypted with a password that took their systems 3 days to crack. Inside was a journal, not a physical one, but a digital record of thoughts, fears, and confessions spanning over a decade. The earliest entry was dated October 16, 2003, 11:42 p.m. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. She threatened everything I've worked for. Said she would report me tomorrow. Claim I stole her ideas when she's just a student building on my research. I only wanted to talk sense into her. Make her understand how things work in academia. She got hysterical. Used that spray. I reacted instinctively. The noise when she fell." The journal continued, describing how he had panicked, used the biology department's Taurus to transport her unconscious body to a remote hunting cabin his family had owned for generations in the Appalachian foothills, over 70 miles from Dayton. The property wasn't in his name but his deceased father's, which explained why it had never appeared in their initial investigation. According to his writings, Marissa had regained consciousness during the drive. There was a struggle. The journal became more fragmented at this point, but the implication was clear. What began as an attempt to reason with her had ended in her death. Subsequent entries documented his meticulous cleaning of the apartment, the car, his careful disposal of evidence, his paranoia during the investigation, his calculated decision to become visibly involved in memorializing Marissa to appear above suspicion. Most disturbing were entries spanning years, showing how he had systematically built his career on her stolen research while posing as a grieving mentor. Within hours, multiple search warrants were executed. The remote cabin was located and forensic teams descended on the property. Whitfield, unaware of these developments, was teaching his usual Tuesday morning advanced biology seminar when detectives Lamont and Wilson entered his classroom. "Professor Thomas Whitfield," Lamont announced, feeling the weight of 11 years in every word. "You're under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Marissa Monroe." The students watched in stunned silence as the distinguished professor was handcuffed and led from the room, his carefully constructed reputation collapsing around him. At the cabin, investigators found what they had sought for over a decade: forensic evidence. Despite Whitfield's efforts to clean the scene, luminol revealed blood traces matching Marissa's DNA. Ground-penetrating radar identified a disturbance in the soil behind the cabin, and there, buried beneath a stand of pine trees, were Marissa's remains. Patricia Monroe received the call she had both dreaded and needed for 11 years. "We found her," Detective Lamont said gently. "And we found who did this to her." The forensic examination confirmed what Whitfield's journal had suggested. Marissa had suffered a severe head injury, consistent with falling against a hard surface during a struggle. She'd been alive when transported to the cabin. The final cause of death was determined to be strangulation. When confronted with the evidence, Whitfield's carefully maintained facade crumbled. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he provided a full confession, confirming the narrative revealed in his journal. He had panicked when Marissa threatened to expose his academic theft and inappropriate behavior. What began as an attempt to intimidate her into silence had escalated into violence, then murder. "I never meant to kill her," he claimed during his formal confession, "but I couldn't let her destroy everything I'd worked for." The academic community reeled from the revelation. An investigation into Whitfield's published works confirmed extensive plagiarism of Marissa's original research. The prestigious career he had killed to protect was revealed to be built on theft and deception. February 2014. Professor Thomas Whitfield was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The evidence was overwhelming: his own journal, forensic findings at the cabin, and his detailed confession. He accepted a plea deal of life imprisonment without possibility of parole. For Detective Sarah Lamont, the case that had defined the latter part of her career was finally closed. She postponed her retirement long enough to see Whitfield sentenced, to witness Patricia Monroe's dignified statement to the court, and to attend Marissa's proper funeral. 11 years delayed, but finally providing closure. The key to solving the case had been a combination of advancing technology, persistent investigation, and a victim who had documented her own evidence against her killer. Marissa's final act, preparing that ethics complaint, had ultimately led to justice, even if it took more than a decade. She was trying to protect other students, Patricia Monroe told reporters after the sentencing. Even in her final hours, she was thinking of others. "That was my daughter, always fighting for what was right." In a bitter irony, the research Whitfield had stolen and built his career upon was being reevaluated by the scientific community. Several of Marissa's original concepts, documented in her recovered files, were now recognized as groundbreaking contributions to cardiac medicine. The scholarship in her name was expanded to support women pursuing careers in scientific research. If this case shows us anything, it's that time doesn't erase evidence. It just takes new methods and persistent investigators to uncover it. If you know someone who appreciates seeing justice served even years later, take a second to share this video with them. The truth always deserves to be told, no matter how long it takes to come to light. The image stunned Dayton. Professor Thomas Whitfield, hair disheveled, eyes hollow, handcuffed, being led from his colonial home on Maple Street. Students froze in the middle of campus as the news alert buzzed on their phones. Faculty members gathered in shocked clusters outside department buildings. Parents called their children studying at Dayton University, suddenly questioning the safety of an institution they'd trusted. No one saw it coming. Not his colleagues, not his students, not even his wife of 26 years. "It can't be Tom," was the refrain repeated across campus. There must be some mistake. To understand the depth of the community's shock, you must understand who Thomas Whitfield was in Dayton. At 58, he wasn't just a professor, he was an institution. The son of a local factory worker and a high school English teacher, Whitfield had grown up in Dayton, earned a scholarship to Harvard, and returned to his hometown to build what became a storied academic career. His office door displayed a collection of accolades: Distinguished Teaching Award, 2001, 2007, 2012, National Science Foundation Research Excellence, 2005-2010, Dayton Citizen of the Year 2009. Photos showed him shaking hands with senators, receiving awards from medical associations, and mentoring generations of students who had gone on to prestigious positions worldwide. He was the department's crown jewel, explained Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, Dean of Sciences. Students would specifically apply to Dayton University hoping to study under him. His research brought in millions in grants. We all thought we knew him. The Thomas Whitfield the public knew had an impeccable background. After earning his PhD from Harvard in 1988, he'd spent 3 years at Johns Hopkins before returning to Dayton University in 1991. His early research had shown promise, but nothing extraordinary. He'd married Janet Roberts, a local pediatrician, in 1988. They had no children but were fixtures at university functions and community events. They donated generously to local causes and hosted an annual holiday party for the department that was legendary for its warmth and collegiality. When Marissa Monroe disappeared in 2003, Whitfield had appeared devastated. He'd organized search parties, spoken emotionally at vigils, and established the scholarship in her name. Each year, he'd delivered moving remarks at the anniversary remembrances, often bringing attendees to tears with stories about Marissa's intelligence and dedication. He spoke about her like a proud father, recalled one faculty member. None of us questioned his grief. Why would we? She was his most promising student. The investigation revealed how meticulously Whitfield had crafted his public persona. Former students reported he would deliberately mentor female students in public spaces, always leaving office doors open, avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. He maintained a professional social media presence focused exclusively on research and university events. His wife appeared frequently in his posts, the picture of academic domestic harmony. But there had been another Thomas Whitfield, one carefully hidden from view. In the weeks following his arrest, investigators pieced together a disturbing pattern. Marissa Monroe hadn't been his first victim of inappropriate behavior, just the first to threaten his career with exposure. Former female students, now scattered across the country, came forward with stories they'd never shared. Uncomfortable comments disguised as academic feedback, unnecessary physical proximity during lab demonstrations, subtle suggestions that their academic futures depended on maintaining good relationships with him. "I thought it was just me," one former student told investigators. "He was so respected and I was just a sophomore. Who would have believed me?" Most disturbing was how Whitfield had weaponized Marissa's disappearance to further insulate himself from suspicion. By positioning himself as the grieving mentor, he'd created a persona above reproach. Who would suspect the professor who established a scholarship in her name? Who would question the man who spoke so movingly at her remembrance ceremonies year after year? His digital journal revealed his calculated approach. April 18, 2004. 6-month remembrance today. Spoke about M's potential, her dedication, brought photos from the lab. Janet commented afterward how moved she was by my obvious grief. If only she knew it was relief. October 16, 2008. 5 years today. Crowd smaller this year. Patricia Monroe still attends, still searches. Detective Lamont watched me throughout my speech. Does she suspect? No matter. The narrative is established now. The devoted mentor mourning his lost student. No one questions it. The investigation uncovered how Whitfield had used his position on various university committees to access Marissa's academic records, research files, and even her university email account after her disappearance. He had systematically harvested her ideas, incorporating them into his own work while carefully covering his tracks. He didn't just steal her life, Patricia Monroe would later say. He stole her mind, her discoveries, her future contributions to science. He built his reputation on what she never got to complete. Perhaps most shocking was how Whitfield had remained in plain sight during the entire investigation. He had been interviewed multiple times, provided DNA samples, cooperated fully with investigators. When the case went cold, he had expressed the appropriate level of disappointment. When new leads emerged, he showed the right amount of hopeful anticipation. His wife, Janet Whitfield, collapsed upon learning the truth. Their marriage had been a cornerstone of his respectable image. Investigators determined she had no knowledge of his crimes, another victim of his elaborate deception. He compartmentalized his life completely, explained forensic psychologist Dr. Rebecca Hansen. His academic persona, his marriage, his community involvement. These were all carefully maintained facades. Beneath them was a man capable of taking a life to protect his reputation, then using that very crime to enhance his standing in the community. It's a level of calculated deception rarely seen outside of clinical psychopathy. The community's reaction to Whitfield's arrest evolved from initial disbelief to profound betrayal. Students who had admired him felt violated. Colleagues questioned every interaction they'd ever had with him. Parents demanded answers from university administration about how such a predator had remained undetected for so long. He was hiding in the spotlight, Detective Lamont explained in a press conference. Most predators avoid attention. Whitfield courted it, but controlled its direction. He created a narrative so compelling that questioning it seemed almost sacrilegious. The evidence against him proved overwhelming. Beyond his detailed journal and the forensic findings at the cabin, investigators discovered he had kept Marissa's red scrunchie, the one she'd been wearing the night she disappeared, hidden in a locked box in his basement workshop. A trophy, Detective Wilson explained. Serial predators often keep items connected to their victims. As news of his arrest spread, the profound sense of betrayal extended beyond Dayton. Scientific journals began reviewing his published works. Academic committees rescinded awards. Former students questioned whether their own work had been appropriated. The damage extended in all directions, touching countless lives. For those who had known both Marissa and Whitfield, the revelation was particularly shattering. Rachel Turner, now an emergency physician in Chicago, flew back to Dayton upon hearing the news. I saw them together dozens of times, she told reporters, visibly struggling with the revelation. In labs, during study sessions, at department events. She respected him so much. She trusted him. We all did. The arrest exposed not just a murderer, but the insidious nature of power and reputation, how they can be used as shields, how they can make the unthinkable seem impossible, how they can blind an entire community to the predator in their midst. A professor's position provided more than just access to vulnerable students. It provided an assumption of integrity so powerful that even when suspicion arose, it was quickly dismissed. Who would believe that the man speaking tearfully at annual remembrances was the very person responsible for making them necessary? The shock that rippled through Dayton wasn't just about a murder solved. It was about a collective failure to see what had been in front of them all along. A wolf not only among the sheep, but trusted to guard them. What's the weather like where you're watching from? Here in Dayton on that fateful night, the autumn wind was sweeping through the streets, scattering leaves and carrying away secrets that would take 11 years to recover. Sometimes I wonder if the weather carries stories we're not yet ready to hear. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Eleanor Simmons delivered the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Marissa Monroe, this court finds the defendant, Thomas Whitfield, guilty. After an exhaustive 6-week trial that captivated the nation, justice had finally arrived. 11 years, 4 months, and 17 days after Marissa's disappearance. Whitfield, once the picture of academic prestige, sat motionless as the verdict was read. The distinguished professor who had walked the university halls with authority now faced life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The prosecution's case, built on newly discovered DNA evidence, digital forensics, and Whitfield's own damning journal entries, proved insurmountable for the defense. For the Monroe family, the verdict brought a complex mixture of relief and renewed grief. "We finally have answers," said Patricia Monroe, Marissa's mother, her voice breaking as she addressed reporters outside the courthouse. "But there's no celebration in this. Nothing brings our daughter back." Standing beside her, Marissa's brothers, who had put their lives on hold during the trial, simply nodded, the weight of 11 years visibly etched across their faces. The sentencing hearing revealed the full extent of Whitfield's calculated deception. Judge Simmons cited his extraordinary betrayal of trust and complete lack of remorse as aggravating factors. "You used your position of authority to prey upon a student who trusted you," she stated, "and then leveraged your standing in the community to evade justice for over a decade." The impact of the case extended far beyond the courtroom. At Dayton University, administrators faced difficult questions about institutional oversight. An independent investigation revealed that 3 female students had filed informal complaints about Whitfield's behavior between 1998 and 2002, but none had progressed to formal investigations. The university president announced sweeping reforms to reporting procedures and established the Marissa Monroe Memorial Research Grant for women pursuing careers in science. For Dayton's close-knit academic community, the revelation that a predator had hidden among them for years shattered their sense of security. "We ate dinner at his house," recalled Dr. Sarah Williams, Marissa's former academic advisor. "Our children played together. The Tom Whitfield we thought we knew never existed." The case prompted many to question their judgment and ability to recognize warning signs. Forensic psychologist Dr. Marcus Chen, who evaluated Whitfield following his conviction, identified a classic pattern of narcissistic personality disorder combined with psychopathic traits. Whitfield exhibited the hallmark characteristics of compartmentalization, Dr. Chen explained. He maintained a carefully constructed public persona while completely separating his criminal behavior. This psychological firewall allowed him to function as two distinct people, the respected professor and the predator. The most disturbing aspect of Whitfield's psychology was how he had weaponized Marissa's disappearance to further his own career and reputation. By positioning himself as the grieving mentor, he created the perfect cover, Dr. Chen noted. Each public display of grief reinforced his image as someone above suspicion, while simultaneously allowing him to relive and maintain control over his crime. Whitfield's wife of 30 years filed for divorce immediately following his arrest. Their 2 adult children changed their surnames and relocated. Secondary victims of violent crime often face impossible choices, noted victims advocate Teresa Gonzalez. They must reconcile the person they loved with unimaginable acts. Rachel Turner, who had discovered Marissa's empty apartment that fateful night, found a measure of closure in the verdict. Now an emergency physician, she established a scholarship for women entering medical school, named in honor of her friend. Marissa wanted to save lives, Rachel said at the scholarship's launch. Through this program, she still will. The scientific community undertook the painful process of disentangling Whitfield's stolen research from his legitimate work. A panel of experts meticulously reviewed his publications, restoring credit to Marissa for her groundbreaking ideas on cardiac tissue regeneration. In a bittersweet vindication, her undergraduate thesis, recovered from university archives, was posthumously published in the Journal of Regenerative Medicine, with her name as sole author. Detective Sarah Lamont, who had refused to let the case go cold, postponed her retirement long enough to see justice served. "Some cases get under your skin," she reflected at her retirement ceremony. "Something about Marissa's disappearance never felt right. The evidence was always pointing to someone hiding in plain sight." For Patricia Monroe, the resolution brought answers but not peace. 11 years of not knowing if your child is alive or dead changes you, she told the court during her victim impact statement. Every missing person poster, every unidentified body on the news, every anniversary without answers, they all become part of you. The Marissa Monroe Foundation, which Patricia had established during the years of uncertainty, continued its work supporting families of missing persons, now with the added mission of advocating for institutional accountability. The case prompted national discussions about power dynamics in academia and the systems that failed to protect Marissa. Universities across the country reviewed their reporting procedures and ethics guidelines. Several states passed Marissa's Law, requiring mandatory investigation of all complaints against faculty members, regardless of their standing or reputation. On the first anniversary of Whitfield's conviction, Dayton University dedicated a research laboratory in Marissa's name. The plaque at its entrance bears not only her image, but her own words recovered from her laptop. Science isn't just about discovery, it's about integrity. The truth matters, no matter how long it takes to find it. As for Thomas Whitfield, he serves his life sentence in isolation, his academic achievements erased, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about power, deception, and justice delayed but not denied. His journal, which proved instrumental in his conviction, revealed a man who valued reputation above human life. A man who could murder a promising young woman to protect his academic standing, then use her memory to enhance it. The truth about what happened to Marissa Monroe on that autumn night in 2003 finally came to light, proving that some secrets, no matter how carefully buried, eventually find their way to the surface. Marissa Monroe's case didn't just end with a verdict and sentence. It fundamentally transformed how missing persons cases are handled throughout Ohio and beyond. What began as the disappearance of a promising young biology student evolved into a catalyst for systemic change, leaving an indelible mark on law enforcement, academia, and the public consciousness. In the aftermath of Whitfield's conviction, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation established the Cold Case Protocol, now known informally as the Monroe Method. This approach mandates regular review of unsolved cases using advancing technologies, regardless of how dormant they may appear. The protocol specifically requires digital evidence to be preserved in formats that allow for reanalysis as forensic capabilities evolve, directly addressing how Marissa's recovered laptop data ultimately broke the case. "We can't predict what technology will reveal tomorrow about evidence we collect today," explained Ohio Attorney General Melissa Harrington at the protocol's launch. "Marissa's case taught us that digital shadows can persist long after traditional evidence has degraded." Detective Sarah Lamont's persistence became legendary in law enforcement circles. Police academies across the Midwest now include her methodical approach as a case study in investigative perseverance. The Lamont Principle, as it's called, emphasizes that investigators should regularly revisit their initial assumptions, particularly regarding suspects who position themselves prominently in search efforts or memorial activities. For Patricia Monroe, who spent 11 years searching for answers, the resolution brought a different kind of purpose. The foundation she established now trains law enforcement agencies in family liaison techniques and advocates for standardized missing persons protocols nationwide. "No family should have to become detectives to find their loved ones," Patricia often says in her presentations. "And no family should wait 11 years for answers that could have come sooner." Dayton University's reckoning with its institutional failures continues. The Independent Oversight Committee established after Whitfield's conviction reviews all complaints against faculty members, regardless of the professor's standing or tenure. The annual Marissa Monroe Ethics Lecture brings leading voices in academic accountability to campus, ensuring that future generations of students understand the importance of institutional transparency. Rachel Turner, whose frantic discovery of Marissa's empty apartment set the investigation in motion, now volunteers with medical students, sharing her experience to emphasize the importance of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. "Trust your instincts," she tells them. Marissa knew something was wrong with Whitfield's behavior. She was preparing to report him. Her courage in that moment eventually led to justice, even if she didn't live to see it. Perhaps the most profound legacy of Marissa's case is how it changed public perception of missing persons investigations. The case demonstrated that time doesn't necessarily diminish the possibility of resolution. Sometimes it simply requires new tools, fresh perspectives, and relentless determination to uncover truths that have been hiding in plain sight. The red scrunchie that once held Marissa's curly brown hair back as she studied has become a symbol of remembrance. Each October 16th, students at Dayton University wear red scrunchies or ribbons to honor her memory and raise awareness about campus safety. The biology laboratory where she conducted her groundbreaking research now bears her name, ensuring that future scientists will know her story. In the end, Marissa Monroe's legacy transcends the tragedy of her death. Her case reminds us that justice, though sometimes delayed, need not be denied. It demonstrates how a single life and a single death can catalyze changes that protect countless others. And it stands as testament to the power of truth to emerge, even after years of darkness. Which cold case has haunted your community? Is there an unsolved mystery you believe deserves attention and fresh eyes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your suggestion might become our next investigation, bringing light to cases long left in shadow. Because as Marissa's story proves, it's never too late for the truth to find its way into the light.